Welcome to Roman Week. And technically, when I say Roman Week, I mean the Roman period of British history, but like the civilization, the Roman Empire was there way before they invaded Britain. And so, what I've ended up focusing on this week is taking a look at some of that old Roman Empire stuff that then influenced Rome's invasion of Britain and then British culture based upon that invasion. And it's really quite an interesting portion of British development, I think. One of the reasons why it's such a global superpower now is probably because it was civilized, with like politics and hierarchies and stuff so early on. And, that might be for better or worse, but it is where we are now. And so I'm looking forward to showing you what I took a look at for this week. We're featuring the Museum of London and the British Museum again, though the British Museum is featured much more heavily this time, and I spent a lot of time there looking at their Roman collection and especially again at the female form and what was desirable in humanity at that time and how that then tied into British history. So I'm going to jump in. I've got a lot of stuff to show you, so I hope you enjoy it. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the British Museum. This palace of history, art, and architecture has been a major point of interest for tourists and English people alike, and I spent a lot of time here looking at the Roman period. My first stop was my main man, Dionysus, who I found at the Museum of London and at the British Museum in a variety of incarnations. And I love this dude because he's the god of wine and the god of the theater. Not to mention, one of my favorite Greek tragedies, the Bacchae, is based around him and his followers who sort of go crazy and start eating each other in the woods. I digress, but I was really happy to see so many lovely renditions of my favorite Greek/Roman god. I sort of cheated a little bit, and instead of directly comparing two portraits this week, sort of like I did with the Dagenham statue and the Shepperton woman last week, I took a look at several statues and sculptures of Aphrodite that I found particularly interesting and looked at the different aesthetic choices made in each one. Aphrodite presented herself to me in many forms, but my favorites were this statue in which she is standing plain and beautiful, really elongated form and very clear definition of musculature, and this second one, which is absolutely breathtaking. It's just as big as it looks here, carved from a single block of stone, and this one she is twisting around herself. It's much more modest than the previous one, and honestly, I fell in love with her because, girl, she's got stomach rolls, and I love how real that is. The Romans were a lot more interested in reality, oddly enough, in some ways than we are. I found a couple of smaller statues of her here, 4 of her in the exact same position, made by completely different people, reclining with Eros or Cupid and coming out of the shell. I like taking a look at Aphrodite because she's the goddess of love and because she is, I think, in my opinion anyway, and I think in a lot of scholars' opinion, the ideal woman as far as the Roman mindset was concerned. And because that was the case, that was carried through into the British mindset. And I think it's really interesting, actually, that as you saw in those pictures previously, she doesn't have a perfect body by our present standards. And I find that refreshing is the wrong word because it's several thousand years old. Comforting, depressing. Then I went looking at other women. Of course, there are plenty of busts of women in the British Museum. There are plenty of busts of women from this period in general. Some of my favorites included this one of Artemis with a line of men asking for her favor, and a few more that are of these more kind of foreign backgrounds. They aren't necessarily Roman, but they were found in Rome or in Britain. I then transferred into kind of men very suddenly when I looked at the top of a statue, thought it was a woman, and then nope, it's not. Men, of course, are portrayed very differently than women who are delicate, graceful, and kind of lithe. They are muscular, strong. They're always doing sports or wrestling with crocodiles or checking out each other's butts. Finally, I treated myself to a room based exclusively on household gods. There, I found the most precious, darling little perfume bottle shaped like a hedgehog, and a bunch of phallic-shaped things like this statue of Priapus, my homeboy, and this itsy bitsy little coral phallus on a gold chain. Additionally, there were portrayals of actors who are known for their large hanging fake phalluses, and of course, I had a lovely time with that. I took a bonus adventure to look at torques, which are a ceremonial neck dressing. They're really heavy, really uncomfortable, and I can't quite understand why people used them, but they look very theatrical, and that reminded me how presentational status was in this era. Plus, they're real pretty to look at. I finally escaped the British Museum with my head intact and moved on to the next big thing. Okay, we are going to move away from the phallus and into Bath. We took a class trip to Bath. You saw the first bit of that when we went to Stonehenge and Avebury last week. And though the town itself is this decadent Georgian masterpiece, I spent a lot of time at the actual Roman baths, after which Bath is named. Funny little fact that we learned on our trip over there is that no one knew for like a decently long spell why Bath was called Bath. And then they found the ruins, and they were like, oh, that explains a great deal. I'm like, how did you not keep record of that existing? I don't understand how that happened. But anyway, gorgeous pictures. Just try to imagine yourself soaking in a healing pool of warm, steamy, like spring water, and follow me into the baths. The Roman baths are absolutely delicious. They smell a little bit sulfuric and are quite warm and humid, despite the fact that we were there on a slightly chilly, rainy day. You aren't supposed to touch the water. Spoiler alert, I did a tiny bit, because it's not treated, and most of it still runs through the original lead pipes used in the Roman era. So that's why it has its kind of creepy green color, but still, it's very beautiful and very zen to look at. They've done a fantastic job here attempting to recreate a lot of the old aspects of the temple that have been destroyed, through the horrible, awful natural destruction of things that happens over time. And also have some great other artifacts from the area, such as this wall that was part of a theater originally, and this lovely mask of an actor. I think we all probably look like that. I found another recreated head, and a statue of a woman with the most radical hair ever. Of course, the goddesses were well represented, including 3 pagan goddesses who I think look a little bit creepy and a little bit adorable in the best possible way. The baths were stunning, relaxing, and beautiful, and hey, fun fact, the hot water comes from the thermal energy of the spring. I found this in the bathroom. Love it. Visiting the baths was definitely my favorite part of that trip, even though I loved Stonehenge and Avebury so much, and part of it was getting to see some of those old theater relics from the city way before, the Brits were settled there. I mean, the Brits as we know them now. I've always really been interested in Greek and Roman tradition because of how important theater was to their lives, and I love that we still use a lot of the same faculties that they did then, as far as columns and kind of a proscenium type deal. And so it's so funny, that theater is with us everywhere. Even my Dionysus chasing earlier in the video was because of my love for theater. Like, if I were to have a god, it'd probably be Dionysus. Don't worry too much about me, Mom. So, that is it for Rome. I will see all of you next week for the Dark and Middle Ages, which we are condensing. The Dark Ages were called dark for a reason. And until then, thanks for listening. Live your best lives and be good.